So we're in a kind of an interesting and special time in the church, the Novem Dialis, the 9 days of mourning. Kind of that word Novem kind of reminds us of November, which is at one point was the 9th month. But 9 days of mourning, so it's customary and it's good. It's good for us to offer masses and offer prayers for the Holy Father. And one way we do that is this Mass today. Now, traditionally, a funeral Mass or memorial Mass, the color would be either white, and actually in some parts of the world in Europe, purple would be the color of funerals, and even black too. But for a Pope and Cardinal, but especially a Pope today, red is the color that is used, the traditional color of red. And that's because red is a traditional color of the papacy, going back to the early church, the Bishop of Rome. And so when we put the red on, it really kind of reminds us, it's supposed to hearken us back to the early days of the papacy, back to St. Peter. And one of the things that also harkens back to the papacy is this gospel, which I think is a really one that kind of outlines what the papacy was, especially in the time of St. Peter and following his early successors, but even now, we read this here, and Jesus is really telling Peter about his future as an apostle. Really, we can go back to that. When you were young, you used to dress yourself, but now when you're old, you're going to stretch out your hands and you're going to go where somebody does not want you to go. And that really kind of talks about maybe the way he's going to die, that he's going to be crucified, and that's maybe the story of the early papacy, because all the successors of Peter following, probably the first 10 or so, at least the first 3 centuries, were all martyrs. If you look through the history, and you go on Wikipedia and you see how each of them died, Peter, Linus, Cletus, Clement, Sixtus, Cornelius, they're all martyrs, even further than that. So the papacy really was a death sentence. If you took on being the Bishop of Rome, you probably knew that one day you were going to meet the sword. So really, we reflect on the papacy. It's a tough office. Being an apostle is a tough office. 10 of the apostles were martyred. So really, it gives us this high gravity of this office, and there's a lot of hardship with it. And today and tomorrow, there's 2 saints that kind of remind us of that. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Catherine of Siena, and she's known for many beautiful writings, but especially one thing. She was known, and this is a time when the papacy was contested by 3 people, 2 anti-popes and a real pope. And the real pope was in Avignon, France. Eventually was exiled to Avignon, France. And he was kind of comfortable there. I think the papacy was there. That seat was there for about 70 or 80 years. But St. Catherine of Siena, in her boldness, went to that pope and told him boldly, like, you have to go back to Rome. That's where the true successor to Peter belongs. And so that really kind of reminds us of how difficult this papacy is. In the 1700s, there were many men who claimed to it, and even one of exile. Now, tomorrow is the feast of Pius V, who presided over the Council of Trent. And the Council of Trent was a big council of reform, because at that time there was a lot of things that were kind of unraveling. Teaching priests, the priests were not educated at that time. So one of the things that the Council of Trent did was to implement a seminary system. So there's a lot of things that kind of attacked the papacy throughout the years, whether it was other claimants to the throne, whether it was an outside force, degradation within the clergy. So there's a lot of things that have kind of done that, and martyrdom is one of them. And the red primarily reminds us of the martyrdom of those early churches, or of those early fathers. So becoming pope was a death sentence, and the red kind of reminds them that this is probably what you're going to be meeting. And even going back to some of the attire. So throughout the centuries, the white cassock became known as the papal kind of regalia, but also red. If you look at some of the papacy, the pictures of popes from like the 1800s, 1700s, even far back, they're outfitted in a little bit of red too. Even the red shoes. The red shoes are kind of a novelty, but also a mark of the papacy. Pope Benedict was the last one to wear them, and so when they wore the papacy, when the Pope wore the red shoes, it was a reminder of the blood that the martyrs spilled in the footsteps of Christ. Especially in Rome. Rome was, when you put on the red shoes, you're reminded that the streets of this town were once paved in the red of the blood of the martyrs. So that's a very vivid image. Now, Pope Francis, on the other hand, he opted not to do that. He opted for the simple black shoes, because I think that has to go with that's his own style. And that's the great thing about Francis, is that he really just had his own style. He had his own personality, and his own boldness. And there's something kind of just really kind of incredible about that. Now, I say this too. I love love both of those. I love both Benedict and Francis. I think sometimes people get into these polemics, and I think it's unfortunate because, I look at there's been 3 popes in my lifetime, and I think I appreciate them equally. Pope John Paul II, because that's kind of who I knew growing up in the church. Pope Benedict, because I've written a lot of his stuff. He's really brilliant. And then Pope Francis, because I've seen him as I've been a priest, and so he's a holy father that I've been able to look up to in these years of my priesthood. So I really look at all of them being really, really great. But really we can look at Pope Francis today because that's who we focus on. And really that simpleness, the simple black shoes, the simple white cassock, it's a reminder of that simplicity that he echoed throughout the world. And even though he lived simply, he still, as the successor to Peter, he really lived in the footsteps of Christ. He really took that mantle of the Vicar of Christ to heart. Even and especially at the end of his life. I really love his last few years. Really, I think he was a great witness. And it kind of comes after Benedict XVI, because when Benedict resigned, there was also this kind of question that floating around, because Francis was not a young man when he was elected the pontiff. And so there was that question going around, would Francis also resign? Because they're saying he's doing a lot of things, he's really kind of doing things his own way. Is he going to still do that? Is he kind of how does he view the papacy? And kind of going back to that, I have great respect for both Benedict and for Francis, but kind of a few years into knowing Francis, I kind of got the sense that this is a guy who's going to die with his boots on. He's not going to resign. He kind of sees the papacy being the lifelong vocation. Not that Benedict didn't, but Pope Francis really kind of saw that he saw it as he was going to die with his boots on. And he did just that. And I think those last couple years were a witness, because while his health failed, he still fulfilled the role. About maybe a year and a half ago, or maybe 2, he wasn't able to stand up for a full mass. He started going around in the wheelchair. He'd be wheeled around, kind of like that. He was being, now he's being led, kind of like this gospel. Now he's being led well, he wants to go to these places, but he's being led around. People are taking him by the hand. And so he would start the beginning of Mass, but he wouldn't be able to stand for the consecration, but he would still be there. He'd be able to still preach to the people, and he'd still be able to fulfill that role, because I think he took that so greatly and with so much humility. And even then, I look to this last day that he had. I talked about it over the weekend, but I just really reflect on that Easter Sunday, and what a beautiful final day he had. To be the Pope, and your final day to be Easter Sunday, and you're able to go out into St. Peter's Square, to go to the balcony, to give a blessing to the people, to ride around in the Popemobile. I thought, what a fitting way, what a beautiful way to spend your last day on earth, and especially in that great vocation after 12 years. And really another thing that showed is that he also, kind of like Pope John Paul II, he showed the world how to suffer. And that's something so great, because he showed that suffering isn't something to go and be afraid of, to go and hide. Even though he was sick, even though his doctors told him to go and to rest, he didn't do that. He decided that, this is not what I want to do. I want to go out and be with my people. And so it also showed us that, suffering not only is something that we shouldn't hide from, but it's something that can help us to have purpose, but also to be an inspiration to others. And that really, his final years also kind of preached to his preaching against what he called the throwaway culture. How we kind of, something is kind of seen as less and less useful, we tend to throw it away. He preached about that fervently, and I think that his last years were really a testament to that. I was reading a Wednesday audience that was maybe, I think, in 2023, and it was the one that he really decried a throwaway culture. One that threw away the unborn, threw away the elderly, threw away the poor. He says that we cannot be a culture that sees something that may seem to not have any value in our eyes and throw it away. But no, we have to realize that every person, from their conception to their death, has a gift from God. Every person is a gift from God. Every moment too. And especially, and really that showed us something else too, because I kind of look at those pictures of Pope Francis on the balcony and that last Sunday with, he's sickly, but really there's really something that's kind of nostalgic about it already. Him going up there in his final moments, fighting through his suffering, fighting through his sickness, and and really showing the world that every life has purpose, even up to the last moment. And so really there's something so beautiful about that, and I think that goes back to its essentially what the papacy is. And I said this on the weekend. I said that the papacy, we shouldn't look at it as an elected official like a prime minister or a president, but really at the heart of it's fatherhood. And he was the Holy Father of the whole church. And I said that, one of the things we can view the church is just one big parish. And unfortunately, the papacy kind of gets drilled down to like another political position, that there's a polemic, like, oh, he's liberal, he's conservative. No, he's our Holy Father. No matter what happens, we may disagree with him from time to time, but really at that sense, he is the pastor. He's the world's pastor. So today we really give thanks for his life, give thanks for that witness, give thanks to that uniqueness, but also give thanks to that witness that he showed as being that successor to Peter, both as the successor to the martyrs, but also that successor to Peter that really showed the world that every life has really great worth. Every moment has its worth as well, and that every person in the world really calls and really harkens back to that witness that the Lord calls us to. That he really, at the end of this gospel, the Lord says two words: "Follow me." And I think those are two words that Pope Francis did throughout his life, and that's words that we can live by, especially as we go forward as a church. No matter who's elected, no matter what happens, is that we can really follow the Lord with fervency and really great love.